First Contact. Commander Zoff stood at the helm of the massive Quack warship, his scaled fingers drumming against the crystalline control panel as Earth's blue-green sphere filled the viewscreen before him. After centuries of interstellar conquest, the Quack had finally set their sights on this insignificant planet, and Zoff had been chosen to lead the invasion force. His reputation for ruthlessness preceded him across 12 star systems, but this mission would cement his legacy as the greatest commander in Quack history. Status report, he barked, his violet eyes narrowing as he studied the primitive satellites orbiting the planet below. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vex, stepped forward with a holographic display. "Our cloaking systems are functioning at optimal levels, Commander. The humans remain unaware of our presence. The Beast is prepared for deployment in Launch Bay 3. Zoff's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his species. The Beast, their ultimate weapon, engineered in the finest laboratories of the Quack Empire. Years of genetic manipulation and cybernetic enhancement had produced a creature that combined the most terrifying aspects of a dozen deadly species. Standing 30 meters tall, with armor-plated skin, razor-sharp claws, and teeth that could shred titanium, the Beast was designed to inspire paralyzing fear in any who beheld it. "Excellent," Zoff purred. "Begin the deployment sequence. I want the Beast released in their largest population center. New York City, I believe they call it." He sneered at the primitive designation. "Let's show these humans the true meaning of power." As his crew rushed to carry out his orders, Zoff allowed himself a moment of reflection. The Quack had studied Earth for decades, monitoring their communications, analyzing their defenses, and assessing their weaknesses. Humans were emotional creatures, prone to panic and chaos. One glimpse of the Beast would send them fleeing in terror, making the subsequent invasion a simple matter of cleanup and containment. Deep in the bowels of the warship, the Beast stirred in its containment chamber. Massive muscles rippled beneath its chitinous hide as neural implants activated, feeding it tactical data and target parameters. Its crimson eyes blazed with artificial intelligence, programmed for maximum psychological impact. The creature's primary directive was simple: create fear, cause destruction, and pave the way for Quack dominion. The teleportation sequence initiated with a shimmer of quantum energy. In a flash of purple light, the Beast vanished from its chamber aboard the ship, only to materialize moments later in the heart of Central Park. The morning sun cast long shadows through the trees as joggers and dog-walkers went about their usual routines, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. The Beast's arrival created a shockwave that knocked several people off their feet. Trees swayed and branches snapped as the creature's massive form displaced the air around it. For a moment, there was absolute silence as humans froze in place, their minds struggling to process the impossible sight before them. Then the screaming began. The Beast let out a roar that shattered windows in nearby buildings, its programmed behaviors activating in sequence. It swept one massive clawed hand through a grove of trees, sending centuries-old oaks toppling like matchsticks. People fled in every direction, their panic spreading like a virus through the morning crowd. From his command chair, Zoff watched the chaos unfold with satisfaction. The humans were reacting exactly as predicted, their primitive fight-or-flight responses proving no match for the carefully calculated terror of the Beast. Soon, similar scenes would play out in cities across the globe as more creatures were deployed. The Quack Empire would add another world to its collection, and Zoff would be remembered as the commander who... "Sir." Lieutenant Vex's voice cut through his reverie. "We have an anomaly in Sector 7 of the park." Zoff's attention snapped to a secondary view screen, where a curious scene was unfolding. A young human female stood frozen in place, holding a leash attached to the smallest, most pathetic creature Zoff had ever seen. The tiny animal, covered in ridiculous amounts of fur, was making high-pitched noises that their translation software couldn't quite process. "Magnify," Zoff ordered, his curiosity piqued by this unusual reaction to their weapon. The image zoomed in just as the small creature, apparently called a Pomeranian according to their database, wriggled free of its restraint. Instead of fleeing in terror like every other living thing in the vicinity, this insignificant ball of fluff was running directly toward the beast, its tail moving in what their xenobiologists identified as a sign of pleasure or excitement. "Impossible," Zoff muttered, leaning forward in his chair. The beast's fear-inducing pheromones should affect all Earth creatures equally. But the impossible was happening right before his eyes. The tiny dog, which their scans identified as Biscuit based on its collar tag, reached the beast's enormous clawed foot and began making excited circles around it, occasionally jumping up and pawing at the armored hide. The beast, programmed to crush and destroy anything in its path, stopped its rampage. Its massive head tilted to one side as it regarded the minuscule creature below. The complex neural networks controlling its behavior began producing unprecedented patterns as it attempted to process this completely unexpected situation. "The beast's aggression protocols are fluctuating," reported the chief scientist, ZYX, her fingers flying over her console. "The stimulus provided by this dog is creating feedback loops in its behavioral matrix." Zoff watched in growing horror as the beast, their unstoppable engine of destruction, slowly lowered its head toward the tiny animal. Its crimson eyes dimmed slightly, the fearsome glow softening to a curious pink. The dog, showing no sign of fear whatsoever, reached up and licked the beast's enormous nose. The beast made a sound that none of the quack had ever heard before, something between a purr and a laugh. "Shut it down!" Zoff roared, rising from his chair. "Initiate emergency recall sequence." But before his crew could comply, the human female, Leela, according to their scans, had overcome her initial fear. She was approaching the beast with slow, careful steps, her hand extended in what their cultural database identified as a gesture of peaceful greeting. "Hi there," her voice came through their monitors, soft and gentle. "I see you've met my dog, Biscuit. He really likes you." The beast, designed to be the most terrifying creature in the known galaxy, responded by nuzzling her palm like an oversized house pet. Zoff collapsed back into his command chair, his proud bearing forgotten as he watched years of careful planning crumble before him. The beast was supposed to be their ultimate weapon, the key to conquering Earth. Instead, it was playing fetch with a Pomeranian while humans gathered around to watch and smile. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex ventured carefully, "should we proceed with deploying the remaining beasts?" Zoff's fingers dug into the arms of his chair as he considered his options. The logical course would be to recall the beast and reassess their strategy. But logic had already failed them today, and his pride wouldn't allow him to retreat at the first sign of difficulty. "Deploy them all," he snarled. "Every beast we have. We'll see how these humans handle an army of our creatures. They can't possibly befriend them all." As his crew rushed to carry out his orders, Zoff couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. But he pushed his doubts aside. He was a commander of the Quack Empire, and he would not be defeated by a species that kept tiny furry animals as companions. The day was still young, and the real battle for Earth was just beginning. Little did Zoff know that his greatest challenge wouldn't come from Earth's military forces or advanced weapons, but from something his species had never truly understood, the power of kindness, and humanity's unlimited capacity for love. Global response. Lieutenant Vex stood at his station aboard the Quack warship, monitoring the global deployment of their beasts with growing unease. In the 6 hours since Commander Zoff had given the order, over 300 of the genetically engineered creatures had been teleported to major population centers across Earth. The results were not what anyone had expected. "Sir," Vex reported, his voice carefully neutral, "I'm receiving unusual data from our units in Paris." Zoff, who hadn't left his command chair since the first beast's humiliating display in Central Park, growled, "Define unusual." The main view screen activated, showing a beast outside the Louvre Museum. A group of art students had set up easels around it and appeared to be painting portraits of the creature. The beast, rather than destroying them as it was programmed to do, was attempting to hold perfectly still, apparently serving as a model. Switch to Tokyo, Zoff commanded through clenched teeth. The screen changed to show another beast in the Shibuya district. Local residents had decorated it with strings of paper lanterns and cherry blossoms. Someone had even managed to place a massive bow on its head. The creature seemed delighted by the attention, carefully stepping around the crowds of people taking selfies with it. London, Zoff barked. A beast was having tea, actual tea, with a group of elderly ladies in Hyde Park. They had somehow managed to fashion a giant cup from a kiddie pool, and the creature was daintily sipping from it while the women chatted and offered it biscuits. Enough. Zoff slammed his fist down so hard it cracked his armrest. Where is the fear? Where is the panic? These beasts were engineered to be the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy. That's just it, sir, the chief scientist ZYX interjected, approaching with a data tablet. I've been analyzing the beast's neural patterns. The basic emotional recognition protocols we installed to help them identify and exploit fear, they're working in reverse. Instead of feeding on terror, they're responding to positive emotions. The human's acceptance and affection are actually rewriting their behavioral matrices. Meanwhile, back in Central Park, Leela and Biscuit had become minor celebrities. News crews from every major network had gathered to film the original beast, now nicknamed Buddy, by local children, as it played fetch with the tiny Pomeranian. The sight of the massive creature delicately handling a stick to avoid accidentally hurting its small friend had gone viral across social media platforms worldwide. Leela found herself being interviewed by a reporter from Global News Network. I honestly don't know why Biscuit wasn't scared, she explained, watching her puppy chase after another stick thrown by Buddy. He just saw someone new to play with. Maybe that's what we all need to do, look past appearances and try to make friends first. The reporter nodded thoughtfully. Your story has inspired similar interactions around the world. We're receiving reports of people approaching these creatures with offerings of friendship rather than running away in fear. Some scientists are suggesting that these beasts might actually be highly intelligent and emotionally sophisticated beings. As if to prove the point, Buddy had figured out how to play fetch in a new way. Instead of throwing the stick, it would hide it behind trees or under leaves, allowing Biscuit to use his keen sense of smell to find it. The tiny dog was in heaven, and the beast seemed equally delighted by their improvised game of hide-and-seek. Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist from MIT, had arrived to study the phenomenon. She set up monitoring equipment around the park, recording everything from the beast's body temperature to its electromagnetic emissions. These creatures exhibit remarkable adaptive intelligence, she explained to a gathering crowd of curious onlookers. Their behavior suggests they were designed to be responsive to emotional stimuli, but perhaps their creators didn't understand the full implications of that capability. In his private laboratory aboard the warship, Dr. Mix, the lead geneticist responsible for creating the beasts, was having a crisis of conscience. He had spent years engineering the perfect weapon, combining the most fearsome aspects of creatures from across the galaxy. But he had also given them advanced neural networks capable of learning and adapting. Now, watching the beasts respond to human kindness in ways he had never anticipated, he began to question everything he thought he knew about his work. Commander, he said, entering the bridge with a thick folder of data, I believe we may have made a fundamental error in our approach. Zoff turned his violet eyes on the scientist, their glow dangerous. Explain. The neural networks we designed for the beasts, they're too sophisticated. We wanted them to be intelligent enough to identify and exploit weaknesses, but in doing so, we accidentally gave them the capacity for emotional growth. They're not just learning from the humans, they're forming genuine emotional bonds. That's impossible, Zoff snapped. They're weapons, nothing more. With all due respect, Commander, the evidence suggests otherwise. Look at this neural mapping from the beast in Sydney. The view screen showed a creature that had wandered into the Sydney Opera House during a children's concert. Instead of causing panic, it had become fascinated by the music. Now it was sitting in the harbor, swaying gently while a youth orchestra performed on the steps, its giant tail creating waves that rocked nearby boats in perfect rhythm with the melody. The beasts are displaying creativity, emotional intelligence, and even artistic appreciation, Dr. Mix continued. These are not the behaviors of simple weapons. We may have accidentally created something far more complex than we intended. In cities across the globe, humans were beginning to organize their responses to their unusual visitors. Social media groups sprang up to share tips on beast care and behavior. Pet supply companies rushed to manufacture enormous toys and treats. Animal behaviorists published guidelines on proper beast etiquette. But not everyone was responding with open arms. In some cities, military forces remained on high alert, tanks and missiles pointed at the creatures despite their peaceful behavior. Corporate interests were already filing patents related to beast technology, while governments debated the legal status of the unexpected visitors. And in a hidden facility beneath the Nevada desert, a secret team of scientists was studying footage of the beasts, trying to understand the technology that created them. If they could decode the Quack's genetic engineering secrets, it could revolutionize everything from medicine to warfare. On the Quack ship, Commander Zoff faced a difficult decision. The invasion was clearly not going according to plan, but retreat would mean disgrace in the eyes of the Empire. There had to be a way to turn this situation around, to remind the humans why they should fear the Quack. "Prepare my personal transport," he ordered suddenly, rising from his command chair. "If these humans think they can turn our weapons against us with their primitive displays of affection, perhaps it's time they met the force behind the beasts." Lieutenant Vex exchanged worried glances with Dr. Mix. They both knew that once Commander Zoff set his mind on something, there was no talking him out of it. But they also knew that his direct intervention could only complicate an already unprecedented situation. As Zoff strode toward the teleportation chamber, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the ship's lights, Dr. Mix made a decision of his own. He quietly sent a coded transmission to his research team, "Initiate Protocol Omega. The beasts must be protected, from both sides." The sun was setting over Central Park as Buddy and Biscuit finally tired of their games. The massive creature had created a sort of nest out of fallen trees and was curled up with the tiny Pomeranian snuggled against its side. Leela sat nearby, sharing her dinner with both of them, while Dr. Chen continued her observations. None of them noticed the strange shimmer in the air above the park, or the small craft that briefly became visible before activating its cloaking technology again. Commander Zoff had arrived on Earth, and he was about to remind everyone that the Quack Empire didn't take kindly to having its plans disrupted, especially not by a species that hadn't even achieved interstellar travel. But as he watched the scene below, even Zoff had to admit there was something both fascinating and disturbing about the way these humans had transformed his fearsome weapons into peaceful companions. It challenged everything he thought he knew about power, conquest, and the nature of strength itself. The real question was, what would he do about it? Collision course. Commander Zoff's personal transport settled silently onto the roof of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. As the cloaking field shimmered around him, he activated his atmospheric adaptation suit, allowing him to breathe in Earth's oxygen-rich air. His violet eyes narrowed as he watched the scene below, where his supposedly terrifying beast was now serving as a climbing frame for human children while their parents took photos. "Disgraceful," he muttered, checking the settings on his neural disruptor, a weapon designed to reassert control over the beast's programming. According to Dr. Mix's research, the creature's neural networks had been overwhelmed by positive emotional input, but a strong enough shock to their systems should reset them to their original aggressive state. Meanwhile, in the hidden facility beneath the Nevada desert, Dr. Diana Rodriguez stared at her computer screen in disbelief. Her team had been analyzing the beast's genetic structure, and what they'd found was revolutionary. "General Hayes," she called to the stern-faced military officer observing their work. "You need to see this." The general strode over, his metals clinking softly. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "The beast's DNA, it's not just advanced, it's adaptive. Their genetic structure is actually rewriting itself in response to human interaction. The more positive emotional connections they form, the more stable and permanent these changes become. Meaning we can't weaponize them, sir. Even if we cracked their genetic code, any clones we created would likely undergo the same transformation. These creatures seem to have an inherent capacity for emotional bonding that overrides their original programming. General Hayes frowned. This wasn't the answer the Pentagon wanted to hear. Keep working, he ordered. There has to be a way to harness this technology for national security. Back in Central Park, Dr. Sarah Chen's monitoring equipment suddenly began beeping urgently. Something's wrong, she announced, drawing Leela's attention away from where Buddy and Biscuit were napping together. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures, similar to what we recorded when the beasts first appeared. Before anyone could react, a figure materialized in the center of the park. Commander Zoff stood tall, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the afternoon sun, neural disruptor raised. Parents grabbed their children and backed away, while police officers who had been casually chatting with Buddy moments before drew their weapons. So, Zoff's voice boomed through his translator, these are the humans who dare to corrupt the Empire's greatest weapons with their primitive emotions. Buddy rose to its full height, positioning itself between the Quack Commander and the humans, particularly Biscuit, who was barking excitedly at the new arrival. The beast's eyes, which had been a warm amber for days, began flickering between that peaceful hue and their original crimson as the neural disruptor's influence fought with its new emotional connections. Aboard the Quack ship, Dr. Mix worked frantically at his console. Protocol Omega wasn't just about protecting the beasts, it was about protecting his greatest discovery. The creature's capacity for emotional growth wasn't an accident or a malfunction, it was the culmination of years of secret work. Lieutenant Vex, he called urgently. I need to show you something. The second-in-command hurried over, his expression concerned. Doctor, the commander ordered us not to interfere. Look at these readings, Mix insisted, pulling up complex neural maps. The beast's emotional development isn't just changing them, it's changing us. Every time we connect to their neural networks for monitoring, traces of their new emotional patterns feed back into our systems. They're teaching us something we lost centuries ago when the Empire chose the path of conquest. Vex studied the data, his professional detachment wavering. The Empire had always prided itself on eliminating emotional weakness, but these readings suggested they had actually eliminated something essential to their species' development. In Central Park, tension mounted as Zoff confronted the gathered humans. Your species is weak, he declared. You mistake kindness for strength. The Empire will not stand for this perversion of our technology. He aimed the neural disruptor at Buddy, whose massive form was trembling as conflicting directives warred in its enhanced brain. The beast let out a sound that was half roar, half whimper. But then something unexpected happened. Biscuit, ignoring Leela's attempts to hold him back, trotted right up to Commander Zoff. The tiny Pomeranian sat at the alien's feet, looking up at him with the same friendly expression it had shown Buddy on that first morning. Zoff stared down at the small creature in confusion. His species had eliminated pets and animal companions millennia ago, declaring them unnecessary for an advanced civilization. Yet here was this insignificant ball of fur, showing no fear of his impressive armor or weapons, offering friendship as freely as it had to the beast. What is this? He demanded. Some kind of primitive psychological warfare? It's called love, Leela spoke up, stepping forward despite Dr. Chen's attempt to stop her. Biscuit doesn't care what you look like or where you're from. He just sees someone new to be friends with. That's what changed your beast, not weakness, but the strength that comes from opening your heart to others. Across the globe, similar scenes were playing out as humans and beasts formed deeper bonds. In Tokyo, a beast had learned to assist with earthquake rescue operations, using its sensitive tremor detection abilities to locate survivors. In the Amazon rainforest, another beast was helping indigenous tribes protect endangered species from poachers. The creatures were finding ways to use their formidable abilities to help rather than harm. The hidden facility's sensors picked up dozens of new energy signatures. More Quack ships were arriving in Earth's orbit, drawn by Commander Zoff's transmission signals. But Dr. Rodriguez's latest analysis suggested something extraordinary. The beast's genetic changes were broadcasting on a quantum level, reaching out to their creators across space. On the Quack ship, Dr. Mix made a desperate decision. He transmitted his complete research files to Earth's major scientific institutions, everything about the beast's true nature and the emotional renaissance they represented. If the Empire decided to respond with force, at least humanity would understand what they were really fighting for. The files included his personal log. The beasts were never meant to be just weapons. They were an experiment in recovering what our species lost. By engineering them to respond to and learn from emotional input, I hope to create a bridge between what we were and what we could be again. The humans haven't corrupted our creation, they've helped it fulfill its true purpose. As Commander Zoff stood in Central Park, neural disruptor still raised but hand now trembling slightly, he faced a choice that would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of the Quack Empire itself. The beast he had brought to inspire terror was now protecting humans from its own creator. The weapon he had deployed to demonstrate strength was showing him a different kind of power altogether. And a tiny Pomeranian named Biscuit was still sitting at his feet, tail wagging, offering a friendship that challenged everything he thought he knew about conquest and control. Lines in the sand. High above Earth's atmosphere, a fleet of Quack warships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek forms blocking out the stars as they moved into attack formation. Admiral Kraz, Supreme Commander of the Empire's Third Expansion Force, stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing Commander Zoff's increasingly erratic reports with growing concern. The situation has become untenable, he announced to his assembled war council. Commander Zoff's judgment appears to have been compromised by prolonged exposure to human emotional contamination. We must contain this threat before it spreads further. But even as he spoke, strange reports were coming in from ships across the fleet. Crew members who had monitored the beast's neural feeds were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Some had been caught accessing restricted Earth cultural databases, fascinated by concepts like pets, friendship, and unconditional love. Meanwhile, in his laboratory aboard Zoff's ship, Dr. Mix worked frantically to complete his final transmission to Earth. He knew the Admiral's arrival meant time was running out. The data package he was sending contained not just his research on the beasts, but something far more valuable, the complete genetic history of the Quack species, including records from before the Great Purge that had stripped them of their emotional capacity. The Empire calls it the Ascension, he recorded, but it was really a descent. In our drive for perfect logic and military efficiency, we engineered the capacity for love and empathy out of our species. The beasts were my attempt to reverse that process, to create beings that could help us remember what we lost. In the Nevada facility, Dr. Rodriguez's team was already receiving and decoding Mix's transmission. The implications were staggering. General Hayes, she called out, you need to see this. The Quack, they're not naturally emotionless. They did this to themselves. And now their own weapons are showing them what they gave up. The general studied the data with a tactician's eye. So these beasts aren't just failing to terrorize us, they're accidentally teaching their creators how to feel again. Not accidentally, Rodriguez corrected. According to Dr. Mix's files, that was their true purpose all along. He hid an emotional regeneration program inside their genetic code, disguising it as part of their fear response system. Back in Central Park, Commander Zoff still stood frozen in his standoff with Buddy and the humans, his neural disruptor hovering uncertainly between targets. Biscuit had grown bored of waiting for a response and was now playfully pawing at the commander's armored boots. I don't understand, Zoff said, his translator struggling to convey the confusion in his voice. Our scientists engineered all signs of weakness out of our species generations ago. How can this tiny creature affect me? Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward cautiously. Perhaps what you call weakness is actually strength. Every beast you sent to terrorize us has instead found a way to help and protect. They've learned that power doesn't have to mean destruction. Above them, the sky began to fill with the distinctive shimmer of quack ships dropping out of cloak. The Empire's fleet had arrived in force, and they were making sure humanity could see them. A message of intimidation, or perhaps a test to see how Earth would respond to such a display of overwhelming force. But Earth's response was not what anyone expected. All across the globe, humans began gathering in the places where beasts had appeared. Not with weapons or signs of hostility, but with offerings of friendship. Children brought their favorite toys to share. Musicians played welcoming songs. Families set up picnics near the beasts, inviting them to join in the simple pleasure of sharing food together. And the beasts, those supposedly terrifying weapons of war, responded with a gentleness that belied their fearsome appearance. They became living bridges between species, their enhanced intelligence and emotional sensitivity allowing them to communicate in ways that transcended language. In Tokyo, a beast that had been helping with earthquake rescue operations suddenly looked up at the ships appearing in the sky. Instead of cowering or preparing for battle, it began to sing. The sound was unlike anything humans had ever heard, a complex harmony of subsonic rumbles and crystalline overtones that seemed to carry emotions directly into the hearts of all who heard it. Other beasts around the world joined in, their song growing into a chorus that reached up to the quack fleet. The Empire's ships registered the vibrations as they traveled through space, the frequencies matching patterns in their oldest historical records, music from before the Ascension, when their species still knew how to sing. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Cross felt something he couldn't explain as the song reached them. His crew stood transfixed, ancient neural pathways beginning to reactivate as the beast's carefully engineered emotional resonance worked its way through their genetic blocks. Dr. Mix's voice came over the fleet's communication system. "You feel it, don't you? The echo of what we once were. The beasts carry within them the key to our species' emotional restoration. Their time on Earth hasn't corrupted them, it's fulfilled their true purpose." In the hidden facility, Dr. Rodriguez's team had finished analyzing the full scope of Mix's data. "It's not just the beast's genetics that are adaptive," she explained to General Hayes. "Their entire neural structure is designed to absorb, amplify, and reflect emotional experiences. They're not just learning from us, they're teaching both species how to understand each other." The general's expression softened as he watched live feeds of beasts and humans working together around the world. "So instead of weapons of war, we got ambassadors of peace. Talk about a manufacturing defect." In Central Park, Commander Zoff finally lowered his neural disruptor. He looked down at Biscuit, still waiting patiently for acknowledgement, then up at Buddy, who had moved from a defensive posture to one of quiet observation. The beast's eyes had settled back to their warm amber color, showing no sign of returning to their original crimson rage. "I was wrong," Zoff said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "About everything." The admission seemed to crack something open inside him, a door that had been sealed for generations. He felt a warmth in his chest that his species' modifications should have made impossible. When Biscuit finally gave up on waiting and jumped up to lick his hand, Zoff did something that shocked everyone present. He laughed. The sound rang out across the park, up to the watching ships, and into the hearts of all who heard it. It was the laugh of someone rediscovering a joy they had forgotten could exist, of ancient ice finally beginning to thaw. But even as this moment of connection unfolded, other forces were moving into position. Not everyone on Earth welcomed the changes the beasts had brought. Not every quack commander shared Mix's vision of emotional restoration. And high above the planet, Admiral Cross had a decision to make that would determine the fate of both species. The stage was set for a final confrontation, not between armies, but between two very different visions of strength, power, and what it means to be truly evolved. Evolution. Admiral Cross stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, his violet eyes fixed on the holographic displays showing scenes from Earth's surface. The beast's song still echoed through the ship's corridors, awakening sensations that should have been impossible for his genetically modified species to feel. All around him, crew members were struggling with similar experiences as centuries of emotional suppression began to crack. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice wavering slightly, "we're detecting unusual neural activity throughout the fleet. The beast's harmonic frequencies appear to be triggering dormant genetic sequences in our population." "Dr. Mix," Cross commanded, his own voice rough with unfamiliar emotions, "explain yourself." The scientist's image appeared on the main view screen, his laboratory visible behind him. "The beasts were never meant to be just weapons, Admiral. They were designed to carry the genetic key to our species' emotional restoration. Their time on Earth has activated and stabilized that potential in ways I never imagined possible." "You committed treason against the Empire," Cross accused, even as tears, actual tears, began forming in his eyes for the first time in his long life. "No," Mix countered gently. "I committed treason against our mistake. The ascension was supposed to make us stronger, but it only made us incomplete. Look at what the humans have shown us about true strength." The displays showed scenes from around the globe, beasts working alongside humans in disaster relief efforts, protecting endangered species, even helping to clean up environmental damage. The creatures' fearsome attributes had been turned to peaceful purposes, their strength guided by compassion rather than aggression. In Central Park, Commander Zoff had finally sat down on the grass, allowing Biscuit to climb into his lap. The tiny dog's unconditional acceptance had broken through centuries of conditioning, reminding him of something his species had lost so long ago they'd forgotten it existed. "The Empire taught us that emotions make us weak," he said, looking up at Leela and Dr. Chen. "But watching these beasts, watching you, I'm beginning to understand that we were wrong. There's a different kind of strength in being able to feel, to connect, to care." Dr. Chen's monitoring equipment was registering unprecedented changes in both the beast's and Zoff's neural patterns. "It's like watching two different evolutionary paths finding a way to merge," she explained. "The beasts aren't just bridging the gap between species, they're healing an ancient wound in the Quack's own development." But not everyone was ready to embrace this change. In the Nevada facility, a faction of military leaders had seen enough. "We can't risk allowing an emotionally awakened alien empire to exist," one general argued. "If they regain their capacity for feeling while maintaining their technological superiority, they could become even more dangerous. Or they could become our greatest allies," Dr. Rodriguez countered. "Look at what's already happening. The beasts have shown us that strength and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. They've given us a chance to help another species heal itself." High above Earth, Admiral Cross faced the most important decision of his career. The Empire's protocols were clear: any threat to their genetic purity was to be eliminated immediately. He had the firepower to sterilize Earth's surface, eliminating both the beasts and the humans who had corrupted them. But as he prepared to give the order, something stopped him. Through the beast's continuing song, he felt an echo of something he had never known he was missing. Memories began surfacing, not his own, but genetic memories stored in his DNA, passing down through generations. He saw his species as they had once been, capable of both great power and great love. "The ascension was a mistake," he said finally, his words carrying across all frequencies. "In trying to perfect ourselves, we committed an atrocity against our own nature. These humans and their capacity for unconditional love haven't weakened our weapons, they've shown us what we sacrificed in our pursuit of power." All across Earth, beasts and humans paused in their activities, listening as the Admiral continued, "Dr. Mix, your act of rebellion may have saved our species from an extinction we didn't even know we were facing, the extinction of our souls." In Central Park, Buddy Gentle lowered its massive head to touch foreheads with Biscuit, a gesture of connection that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. The tiny dog's tail wagged faster, completely unafraid of the being that had been engineered to inspire terror. "Look at them," Leela said softly to Zoff. "Size doesn't matter. Power doesn't matter. All that matters is the choice to be kind, to be open to love. The commander nodded, feeling the last of his emotional barriers dissolving. The Empire taught us that evolution means becoming stronger, more efficient, more perfect. But watching these beasts adapt, watching them choose love over fear, perhaps this is what true evolution looks like. Admiral Kraz made his decision. Instead of attacking, he opened his ship's landing bays. To all Quack personnel and to the people of Earth, today marks the beginning of a new chapter for both our species. We came here seeking conquest but found something far more valuable, a chance to reclaim what we lost. The beast's song swelled to a crescendo as Quack ships began landing around the globe. But instead of disgorging weapons and soldiers, they brought scientists, historians, and cultural experts eager to learn from humanity's example. The creatures that had been meant to inspire fear had instead inspired something far more powerful, hope. Dr. Mix's voice came over the communications one last time. The beasts were engineered to be the ultimate weapons, combining the most fearsome aspects of life from across the galaxy. But in giving them the capacity to learn and adapt, we accidentally gave them something else, the ability to teach us what we had forgotten. They became a bridge not just between species, but between who we were and who we could become. In the months that followed, Earth became a place of unprecedented cooperation and growth. The beasts, no longer weapons but ambassadors, helped facilitate understanding between humans and Quack. Their unique ability to process and reflect emotions made them perfect mediators as the Quack began the long journey of emotional recovery. Biscuit and Buddy became symbols of this new era, their unlikely friendship inspiring millions. The tiny Pomeranian who had faced down an alien invasion with nothing but love and a wagging tail had shown both species that true strength often comes in unexpected forms. Commander Zoff, once dedicated to conquest, became a leading advocate for emotional reintegration among his people. His transformation from hardened warrior to someone who could laugh, cry, and love became a model for others to follow. And in parks and cities around the world, humans and beasts continued to form deep bonds of friendship and understanding. The creatures' fearsome appearances no longer inspired terror, instead, they reminded everyone who saw them that love could transform even the most formidable weapon into a force for good. The invasion that had been meant to demonstrate the power of fear had instead revealed the greater power of love. In the end, it wasn't superior technology or military might that changed the course of history. It was a tiny dog with a big heart, teaching the universe that sometimes the greatest strength lies in being unafraid to love. The end.